criminal justice is a monster. I don't care how well-versed you believe you are as an attorney or how well-versed you are in the law. You step foot in the courtroom, that's a scary event. So I try to create an event within my courtroom of love, of a place of patience, a place of where I know you're going to be anxious as an individual defendant appearing before me, but I want to make it as educational, as smooth as possible. Just because you've done wrong does not mean you do not deserve love. Just because you've done wrong does not mean you do not deserve grace. So if I can create a space where I can show an individual, hey, you've done wrong, yet I still see you as a human being, as a person, why not share that to everybody? If the goal is truly rehabilitation, how can I bring love to this room to help with the rehabilitation process?
Welcome to What I Know Now, a podcast that uncovers the stories, experiences, and insights of individuals who have been impacted by the justice system. I'm Cole Williams.
And I'm Joel Van Kuiken. Our mission is to drive positive social change in the lives of system-impacted youth, their families, and our communities.
We sit down with incredible guests who generously share their lived experiences and the lessons they've learned along the way.
We've got a special guest today.
We do.
Judge Kellen Dotson is joining us.
Afternoon, gentlemen.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon. So I feel like I want to just jump right in because, to have Judge Dotson in front of us is definitely an honor. So, if it's okay, I just want to kind of get right into it.
It's an honor for you to get started, Your Honor.
Yes.
Thank you,
Isn't that something? So, Judge Dotson, one of the first questions I have is, can you just kind of give us a little introduction about who you are and, kind of what your role is currently in our family court here in Grand Rapids, Michigan?
No problem. I'm recently appointed judge of the 61st District Court in Grand Rapids, Michigan. I've served in that role since July of this year, and now I handle mostly criminal and civil matters here in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
So can you tell us a little bit about how did you arrive to the space you are right now?
How far back can I go?
As far back, I guess, that inspired you to want to do the work that you're currently doing as a judge currently?
As far back, I went to law school hoping to be a civil rights attorney. There was always a passion to help those who may not have been heavily represented in the criminal justice system. That led to an internship with the public defender's office here in Kent County. And I said, that's what I want. Felt like home. I felt like these guys were the guys, those individuals, those attorneys at the Kent County Office of the Defender were the individuals who I aligned with, who I liked working with these individuals, the other attorneys. And then that turned into a career of public defense, where I had the opportunity to get to know individuals, to get to know their families, and really understand the criminal justice system. That journey here in Grand Rapids took me to Minneapolis, Minnesota, to be a public defender there for 2 years. And there I was heavily challenged as a attorney, again, a public defender in Minneapolis. And an opportunity came up to come back to Grand Rapids, Michigan, where I call home and a community that I want to be a part of. And I said, I like this. And I got that call from Whitmer. Governor Whitmer called, and it's been the rest of it history. Man.
Yeah, I think one thing that is meaningful to us is that you've kind of been a supporter of the Delta Project. Yes. You were part of kind of our original, what I like to call Delta Project 1.0.
Yeah.
When we were going into the juvenile detention center and talking to system-impacted youth, and bringing people from the community in to interact with these guys. Could you, maybe you could speak a little bit about how that experience might have shaped you a little bit, and your opinion of how we can maybe better serve kids and families in our juvenile justice system.
I had an opportunity to get to know Luis through the Delta Project, how that impacted me. I've always been an individual that believes in giving back to your community. I believe the community's done so much to give back to me. So an opportunity to sit down with an individual and to just to show up, be present. I had no idea the impact it was going to make upon me and also that young man. Luis and I had a continued relationship for a period of time. But, just to to recognize that there's a vacancy in individuals that look like me as professionals, and to come in and to just sit in and be a part of the Delta Project, sit down with the young man. That filled my heart so much. It let me know that I've reached accomplishments that I never thought I would reach. At the same time, it gave me an opportunity to sit down and kind of give back, not just kind of give back, but to give back. And that impact, that opportunity, where I have individuals in Minneapolis watching that interview, I thought that had left me behind in Grand Rapids, but no. I see that just an afternoon after a day of work and sitting down with a young man and having a conversation, how large that was, just not for me, but for the community and for that individual, Luis. And anything I can do to give back, I will always be a part of.
Yeah. I remember the impact of that too, because I remember you extending a card to Luis and in the detention center, and then seeing him show up at your office like, hey,
Yep.
yeah, you gave me this card, man. So I'll make sure you keep your word and you follow through. And so I thought that was brilliant to see that passing of not only that card, but the passing of that relationship and the connection that created by a student trusting someone from their community to hold them accountable, but also, build that relationship. So yeah, I remember that and how impactful that was.
Now, as a judge, what's your perspective on kind of how things are and kind of how we might move forward in these times in a way that is going to help us be better,
Right.
do things better?
One thing I always implement in the courtroom is I always reach out to individuals that have some kind of, have an individual show up for them. I feel like so many individuals, as part of the criminal justice system, take this journey, take this travel on their own. And it's a scary monster. The criminal justice system is a monster. I don't care how well-versed you believe you are as an attorney or how well-versed you are in the law. You step foot in the courtroom, that's a scary event. So I try to create an event within my courtroom of love, of a place of patience, a place of where I know you're going to be anxious as an individual defendant appearing before me, but I want to make it as educational, as smooth as possible. Even though you've done wrong or have alleged to done wrong, I still want to make sure that's an environment in which you can feel comfortable in. We deal in a community where people don't feel comfortable sharing their shortcomings. So to share with somebody, hey, I got court today, I'm scared, I'm nervous, can you be here for me? Yeah. If it's just a ride, if it's just somebody who just knows you, maybe you're afraid to tell a parent, but the fact that they showed up and the fact that the individual who's struggling shared that with another individual, a lot of people handle these journeys on their own. So an individual that does have support, that's huge. That's huge. And I find that as a big act of maturity for the individual to share and for the individual to show up to support, just because so many of us deal with this stuff on our own.
Wow.
Yeah, that seems like a big first step for people who may be facing things that they don't want to be involved in, frankly, that are difficult.
Right. And I think what you just said for me is a paradigm shift in the experience of entering into the courtroom. I don't think I've heard at all this idea of love in the space of court. And so I'm really curious about why is that important and necessary beyond just the idea of love in family court just seems, it sounds like family court that should be embedded in the experience. But I'm just curious as to why that's so important, because that's a really big word.
Right. I'll tell you now. I do criminal and civil work.
Okay.
I don't do as much family. I actually do little to family work.
Okay.
But just the reason why love is important is because it's been shown to me as I've gotten older, where I've shared my experience with the youth. Individuals tell me it sounds like you've had a lot of love in your life. So if it is that love that helped me progress as an individual, why not create that amongst everybody? Just because you've done wrong does not mean you do not deserve love. Just because you've done wrong does not mean you do not deserve grace. So if I can create a space where I can show an individual, hey, you've done wrong, yet I still see you as a human being, as a person, why not share that to everybody? If the goal is truly rehabilitation, how can I bring love to this room to help with the rehabilitation process? And I tell a lot of individuals, if the defendant comes before me, I tell many of them, I do not want to see you again. I definitely not in this context, unless you were in a suit and tie and you're an attorney. Now, if you see me outside, that's a different story. Please say hi. I don't care if I'm with my mother or if I'm with my wife or with my daughter. Please say hi. You see me outside, that's great. But in these walls of this courtroom, I never want to see you again, unless you're a professional here to represent somebody else, be an advocate for somebody else. So that love piece is, one, I recognize you. This is not just the front for the moment, but this is something that can be continual, like handing out a card. Yeah. This can be a continual relationship, and I believe I do show up, or I challenge myself to make sure that I show up and that I'm actually seen. That's greatly important to me. I don't care what you've done wrong. As again, might come from a public defender background where I've had to learn to love a lot of the individuals I served as a public defender, but I see the reaction that you get from individuals. And I've been in many of courtrooms where it was not love. It was the opposite. It was just frustration. It was anger. It was yelling. It was get out of my face. It's like, no, let's slow this thing down. If we truly are going to change or address the criminal justice system, let's start with love. Let's start with grace and see where we can go from there.
So you brought something up, rehabilitation. Yes. And I just, what I envision our justice system being about rehabilitation, but is it? Are we at a point where we can say that, or are we in a space where that may not be on the table as much as we might like it to be?
Right. The rehabilitation piece, I believe it is, one, there needs to be buy-in from those that are at the top of the criminal justice system, but also has to be a buy-in on the individual. We're asking so many individuals that have their own traumas, their trust issues, to listen to the judge, believe that the judge does care for them, believe that a probation officer cares for them, and to get that buy-in for that rehabilitation piece. Because so much of it is, come on, this is you just talking to me, you're just using language, these just words, but actually have some actions to back up the words. I would like to get that rehabilitation piece. Being so young in this profession now in terms of time in the occupation, I truly do not know if those goals of rehabilitation have been met. Mm-hmm. Hopefully we can do this sometime in the future, come back and we can talk to each other. But I want to believe, I truly want to believe that rehabilitation is happening sometimes at a snail's pace, but I would like to believe that there is some rehabilitation happening.
Well, something that is constantly blowing my mind is we go back to our North Star, the Delta Project. How do I become something I don't see, right?
Yes.
And so I remember you as a defense attorney, and I remember contacting you about some of the guys that I've worked with, because I didn't, in my mind, I'm like, okay, I know a lot of defense attorneys, but I don't know a lot of Black male defense attorneys, right? And so now I'm sitting in front of you now as a judge, and it's for me now, it's another layer, especially now when I'm asking young men, hey, you should consider going into law, right? And we know that the disproportionate number of Black boys and Black men across the country as it relates to our criminal justice system is, they're there, right? And so, my question for you is, what would make a Black boy want to enter into law when you don't typically see it? Because I didn't see it, so I didn't know that I could become it. And so I'm really curious, how did you become something you didn't see? Or maybe you did see it?
That was, well, I'll start with my sights. That was a blessing that I did not understand until I got older. I have a father that's a lawyer. I have a grandmother who was one of 14 to go to college. I believe she was the youngest growing up in Kissimmee, Arkansas, who breathed into our head, you have to get educated. You have to go to school. I had a grandmother that was telling me since middle school that I was going to be a lawyer. I was going to take the bar once, and I was going to be like my father. I said, all right. And, as a youth, you're trying so hard to push away and create your own lane. But that is something I was able to see. It was a blessing that I was able to see, even though my father and we didn't always live in the same household. I always knew there was an image 2,000 miles away. We grew up in Arizona. He was either in Milwaukee or in Michigan. But there was always an image that I knew of excellence, and it looked in the form of a Black male. So I had that sight. But for other individuals who do not have that sight, I'm always available, but again, just because I'm available doesn't mean much. I try to build a reputation in the community. So if anybody were to say, hey, who is Kellen Dotson? I had this lawyer show up. His name is Kellen Dotson. Possibly they come across somebody that's dealt with me in the past.
Yeah.
But it's a continual responsibility that we carry, where we have to be present in my mind, and I will always be available. But it's that second part that the individual has to also want to be a part of this.
Yeah.
I can always extend a card. I'm a part of the 3 R's program through Grand Rapids Public Schools at Ottawa Hills High School. Young man said he wanted to get into sports medicine. I gave him a card. I put my brother's cell phone number on the back of it because my brother is a athletic trainer for the University of Minnesota. And I'm curious. I want to know.
Yeah.
I haven't heard from my brother yet, but I'm curious. It was over a month ago. Will he make that phone call?
Yeah.
Does he understand the opportunity that's been passed along through this card? Where he take advantage of it?
Yeah.
Because it's really that simple. Getting to know adults and having adults stay a part of your life. To have that card, to have that invitation, do you take advantage of that invitation?
Yeah.
That's the second part. And that trust piece, that actually somebody really does care about me, that I'm worthy enough to have this professional reach out to me and want me to be a part of their life.
Yeah. I love that, because what I also heard you just say, that it's bigger than having a transactional relationship. I want to have a relationship with you, but it's a two-way process.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's correct. I mean, you guys know you can give all the guidance out in the world, but if you do not drink that water, you truly don't take advantage of the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but it's hard with young guys seeing that. I mean, I just remember as a teenager, I mean, I was scared. I was shy. You know, I had opportunities I didn't take advantage because I didn't believe strongly enough in myself. And, you know, it took years for me to gain that confidence where, oh yeah, I can make a call like that. But I just have to imagine that maybe for some of these guys, it's kind of like, there's a real sense of, can I do this? Do I have the capability? Especially if I haven't experienced anything like this before. So this idea of holding grace for people and having empathy for kind of where they're coming from in this kind of circumstance, man, we hope they make the call and they make the right choice. But the reason they may not do it may not be a question of, oh, I don't want anything to do. It may just be like, man, I'm scared to do that.
That's fair.
Yeah.
You know?
That's fair.
And in addition to that, if they've had any trauma associated with men giving, or, you know, I mean, so there's a host of things that sort of get in that way. But I think what you said is important. It's about building that trust, establishing that relationship, and helping them see that you are there through consistency. So I think that's a really important piece. But in addition to that, the idea, I just have to go back to this idea of love in the courtroom. Because I think that's it's the most vulnerable place to be in, coming from, you know, being a father of a child in that space. And it can be terrifying. And so I think just this idea of reimagining what the courtroom can look like for individuals who have to face a judge is just really, I mean, that's a really important piece that I'm hoping will, you know, resonate across our listeners, or to our listeners.
Yeah, and I think, you know, another element we don't often think about is just identity.
Oh, man.
And all the different identities that we all have.
Yeah.
But especially a teenager, you know, is under 18 or whatever age they might be, how they show up. And I have to imagine showing up in a courtroom really gets them down to the basest of identity that they might have, and they probably can't hide.
Very true. You in that courtroom, as I've learned, sitting on the bench, you cannot hide. I see everything. But the individual, that identity piece is, I do not want an individual coming in there and thinking that I'm now a defendant, I'm a criminal, I'm a bad person. So yes, that if that is what you're referring to in regards to the identity piece, that's a big one. I would love to challenge that. I would love to counter that thinking. That's going to be an ongoing, consistent behavior that I need to implement within that room, so that individuals know this is not just words. This truly is something that he believes in and something he practices. He being the judge.
That's really powerful. I mean, and maybe it's that kind of thinking that kind of helps kind of move the ball down the court, that, and we're talking about love and grace and these things, and that's kind of what I mean. But what does it take? How do you reach that tipping point when you do become and you see it? That's what Delta Project is about, helping people see that. But there's no guarantee that's going to happen.
Yeah.
And everyone's journey is different. How do they get there? How do you counsel them in such a way that opportunity is open to them, even though they've got trauma and many things going on, and maybe faced with a charge that they're going to have to work through.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Judge Dotson, what would you say to community members or listeners who will listen to this? What would you say to them in terms of like holding you accountable, right? Because I think that we don't know that we can hold our local judges accountable, right? And so, how would you speak to accountability in that space, if that makes sense?
No, that does make sense. I believe the image of a judge, or the belief of a judge, is that they're so far removed from the community that they sit on this bench where everybody else has to come approach them. And I believe there's a system of belief that they are not a human being, or that they are not approachable. So that's to hold me accountable. Again, I have a daughter that goes to school around the corner. I'm very involved in her schooling. Wife and I, we're outside every weekend, either going to parks, walking everywhere with the daughter. If you see me outside, if you see me at an event, please feel free to challenge me. Feel free to say, hey, Judge Dotson, or hey, Kellen, I saw this occur and I didn't agree with that, okay? And that now it places the ball on me to get the ball moving down court, to sit down and listen and to be present and make time for that individual. But that challenging piece, I can't speak for all judges, but that challenging piece for me is I want to make myself available. I want to make myself seen, so an individual does feel comfortable approaching me and talking to me, and has the strength to say, hey, you know what, you individual, judge, you did wrong. And feel comfortable saying that, and to have me not get caught in my feelings, but to also listen and to say, hey, you're right, I did do wrong. Let's talk about that. What would you like to see me do better? And that is something that when I dream about this new role as judge, and I think about this opportunity that I have, it's like, okay, how can we do this different? How can we do this different and be seen differently than when I was a defense attorney and when I got in trouble myself with this young man. I take the city bus every morning. I make myself available to be seen. It's like, if you want to say hi, if you want to speak to me, I want to always make myself available. So I think it is on me to be a part of this community, not just as a judge, but as a human being in a basketball shorts and a T-shirt, where no matter what I'm wearing, you can see me and talk to me.
Yeah. I think that human connection is key, because I know what it's like to go into a courtroom and be completely on edge because it's the judge, and the judge is that whole feeling, and on top of what you might be there for,
right.
And so just that humanizing a judge I think that's really key in terms of establishing relationship, and being present in the community, which I think is one of those things that we're constantly talking about when we even talk about community policing, this idea of like, what does it mean to have your police live in your community? What does a community police officer look like? And why isn't it even important to have a community police officer in your neighborhood? So I think this idea of seeing you in human spaces where humans coexist is really important.
With what you see and what you've seen, do you see disparities in the system? We have a lot of brown and black boys in the Delta Project that are faced with these issues and these journeys that they're on. In your opinion, I mean, how do we move forward?
Are there disparities in the system? Yes. I'll start off as my role as a public defender. Whether it's gender, whether it's race, whether it's socioeconomic status, yes, there's disparities. One thing I've always said is, when in my defense attorney days, was, why don't people just show up to court? Why don't we just flood the court system? You don't have to have a court date to show up. It's a public arena. It's a public venue. Show up and let you gauge for yourself what you see in that system. And I think it's another way to hold the judge accountable. It holds the prosecutor accountable, the defense attorney accountable. It holds everybody in that room accountable that you must do your job if people show up and they're watching you. As a judge, I do. There are days when I have to do videos from the jail where I'm setting bonds, and it's a cycle of individuals that look like me. They're coming before me. Now, what has amazed me is how respectful those individuals have been. Yes, sir. No, sir. Or, oh, I got a black judge. Hey, you got a black judge. But it's that patience. It is that disparity. It is that piece of just with what your eyes catch.
Yeah.
Yes. There. If it feels like if I were to have 10 individuals in front of me that need to be arraigned on a bond, in my mindset, I would say at least 7 of those individuals are people of color. So yes, I do see a disparity. Why that disparity? I have many thoughts in my mind as to why, in regards to policing, in regards to just poor diet that you receive through the culture, and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. There are a lot of issues. There are a lot of the reasonings that lead to this disparity. So what can we do about it? One thing off the top of my head is show up, be a part of the court system, educate yourself. It also puts everybody in that room on notice that people are watching you. Moving forward, what can we do? Goes back to my grandmother, education. That's what I always try to beat into people's heads. This individual comes before me, what's up with education? What's up with schooling? Oh, I'm 30 years old, don't matter. Education will take you places you never thought it would take you. So but it's that consistency again. It's that continual language. This is what expected of you.
Yeah.
I don't care what you've gotten yourself into today. Tomorrow can always be greater than what today is. So it's that continual language. It's that continual pushing, that expectation piece. That just because you've done wrong does not mean that is where you lay. That is not where your life ends. That you can still better yourself, better your community, better your family members, better the offspring that you have in the future based upon you making a change.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you just gave us an incredible answer that gives us kind of a short-term way
Right.
to promote change, but also a way to think about this longer term. And I think one thing Cole and I understand is this is not a reactive quick fix. I mean, that is our culture. We like to react and have things happen quickly. Doesn't work that way.
Yes, sir.
In most cases, in the majority of cases. I mean, you might be able to do something quickly, but chances are it's not going to be as sustainable and it's not going to be as solid. So I love the idea of people spending time in the courtrooms. I mean, what would that look like? Do I just show up and can I find the schedule somewhere? I mean, how could someone listening actually be present in the courtroom?
Right. In terms of schedule, there's always in the Kent County Courthouse on Ottawa and Lyon. You can always come into the courtroom or come into the courthouse, go through the metal detectors, and there's like a QR code for the schedule where you can see what's going on. You can find your individual case. You can see what's happening in the courthouse. Just show up. One thing I'm always aware of is it costs a lot to park downtown. So if you have the availability to park and walk in, or to go with another individual, kind of a carpool, so to speak, just show up. Just show up. Learn this system. I do not believe individuals understand how truly we are all affected by the happenings in that courthouse. Not just criminal, but whether it's your mother, your auntie, your brother, your sister getting sued, whether it is a landlord-tenant matter where now a relative or a family member is being kicked out of their home. But it's just good to see that system, and you can build your own understanding based upon what you've seen with your 2 eyes. Just show up.
Yeah.
Show up.
Yeah. Were there any things that surprised you now that you're a judge and you're, because you talk about this idea of looking through your eyes. You saw it from the perspective as a defense attorney, viewing judges. Now that you are a judge, can you speak to what you've seen? What's surprised you? What's you like? Oh yeah, that has to change. Are there any of those moments where you can say, oh wow?
Yeah. What's been glaring since I stepped into this new role, I found that giving individuals opportunity to speak will leave individuals, or to be heard, does leave individuals with smiles on their face, even after a judgment, a negative judgment.
Wow.
But I'm trying to, really trying to think about that, because it's been different. There have been some times where I've told friends outside the legal field that, it's like you met the wizard now. You pull back the curtain.
Yeah.
And it wasn't exactly what you expected it to be when you were practicing. You guys talked about coming to a courtroom and being nervous, being intimidated by a judge.
That's the other part of a lot of this work, is that we have these ideas about these roles, and then we get in them and you're like, oh, okay, wait. Oh, I either love this, or like, oh, okay, I didn't know this idea of pulling, like you said, pulling back that curtain. But I think about so many young men who are so gun shy of, I don't even know if that's the correct terminology, of like, hey, I do not want to do anything connected to being a person, a part of the law. I want to try to avoid that at all cost. But part of me wonders if some of our young men and young women who have not had good experiences with the law from their viewpoint get an opportunity to experience it on the other side in a pathway that allows them to see, I'm not only just standing in front of the judge, I've had an opportunity to go into the judge's chamber. So there's these different vantage points that I think continues that our young people need to have to sort of see the humanistic side of the role. Whereas it wasn't until I had an opportunity where I had a relationship with the judge, in terms of like a co-worker relationship, where it's like, oh, I'm going into the judge's chambers. I get to see the judge's chambers, and then I get back there and I'm like, oh, so this is what it looks like. So you don't get the opportunities to see that. And so I don't think our kids get that. Our parents don't. So this idea of having the lens is cleared off so that you can see it full circle just makes it even more valuable in that space. So I do appreciate you for holding space for that.
Thank you.
So I guess I wanted to ask you just this idea of mentorship and on top of that, storytelling, I mean, I don't think enough of us think about our own stories and how to tell those stories. But, how important is, obviously mentorship is important, but can you think of examples where maybe you've mentored someone, or you've seen someone come through your courtroom that has been impacted by a mentor and has found themselves in a better or worse situation because of it? Because, I mean, who we interact with is kind of who we are.
Right.
So finding those people that can really support us and are there for us through the good and the bad.
An individual who we're going to share our story with will not look at us differently, will not use that against us, and that person will hear me. That person may not agree with my entire story, but that person will listen and will comment appropriately based upon what they've heard. Maybe they'll validate what they've heard. I know myself, growing up, mainly during college and law school, and even as a young professional, I said, if I had a mentor, if I had someone that could show me how to do this, man, where I could take off, man, what I could accomplish. And I think that's a piece of me giving back. I remember during the Delta Project, the follow-up with Louise, who asked me, do you feel like you're talking to a younger version of you? And I find that a lot. I tell myself when I reflect upon this, I believe I'm doing it for the young man who felt he would not accomplish certain things. So I knew what I felt needing a mentor, so I wanted to pass that on to other individuals. What scares me sometimes is that every influential voice is not a great voice for you. So when you talk about negative impacts, I used to do a great deal of mentoring at River City Scholars, their school, and I had a young man who was telling me, oh, no, I got this because there's this YouTube guy that I follow, and he tells me all this positive stuff, and I got it, Mr. Dotson. I said, okay, all right, okay, maybe I need to listen to this guy. Maybe this is the Dalai Lama. Maybe this is the individual. But I there are so many influences. There are so many avenues, streams of information that I do not think all individuals are ready for. So there are a lot of quote unquote mentors there, but it may not guide you to where you need to be. So in the courtroom, I strongly believe, and it's another thing that I think our young men and women, or excuse me, mainly our men of color, need to really realize is that when they get stuck, when they get into a jam, they reach out to a woman. They reach out to a woman, they reach out to a mother, they reach out to a grandmother, they reach out to a sister, they reach out to an aunt, they reach out to a female cousin. When you need to be bonded out, you need somebody to get your back. So I really wish our young men would recognize who they're seeking help from, and maybe that would change things. But I do believe most of the time those mentors are those family members, and that I've seen a lot in the courtroom, and most of the time usually a woman.
Yeah, it just seems like the community can step up a little bit here.
Yes, sir.
Can look for these opportunities to play a larger role in the lives of kids that we don't hear from them. You know, we come up with ideas and solutions and ways of thinking that often doesn't include their voice. Mm-hmm. And I think that can work against us. And I mean, I also was just thinking, yeah, there are mentors and there are influencers, right? And it looks like a lot of these guys and are being influenced by a lot of different spaces. And maybe there's a fine line between mentorship and an influencer and how a mentor influences us. We have to think that through.
Mm-hmm. And I also want to say, too, from just listening to young people, because I think young people are communicating all the time to us, but I don't necessarily know if we understand the language that they're using.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the challenge for adults, is that how do we make sure as community members, as future mentors, in all of our professions, that we remember that young people, as I was at one point, spoke a very different language than the adults around me. Right. And so how do we make sure that we're continually finding ways to, we talk about showing up, but how do we make sure we continue to find ways to be present when we are there? Because I think our young people are everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's just how do we make sure that we're present when they are there, and then listen to them or try to understand them even when they don't speak the same language. If you don't know all the nuances, or you don't know who you're supposed to call, or it can be very complex to enter into that space. And if you've not had a good experience with the previous judge or a previous attorney, then that all of those ingredients set the stage for how you show up if you do make another poor choice or another poor decision. So I think we have to reimagine what mentorship looks like and what is mentorship. Mm-hmm. And who gets one, because that's another one. There are certain people that get one and others who don't. I think you being here, you being in this space with us, and just even hearing people say, "Oh, wait, a black judge," right. And I want to ask this question, Judge Dotson: does that carry a heavy weight too? This idea of, "Oh, you're a black judge." Yeah. And where does that sit? Where does that sit with you? We talk about race and we talk about equity and we talk about inclusion and all of those things. But, there is this new thing. Now you're not only a judge, but you're a black judge.
Right.
And so I'm just curious about how do you navigate in that space in your mind too?
Yeah. I think being a black judge, a young black judge, the love, the support from the community is amazing. I could not quit this job. I could not step away from this job unless I was forced to, in terms of an election, just because how many people are just happy for me. Yeah. So being a black judge, that's been an honor in itself. Being a young black judge, having individuals coming up to me who saw me on Facebook, who had no idea who I was, but saw that somebody else posted something about me, and they felt the comfortability to come up and say hi to me, just based upon what they saw. It's not a heaviness. I'm trying to find it. It's the honor. It is a responsibility that I would gladly take on. I've told myself since I was a young child, something that's beat into my head: are you a leader or are you a follower? So to be able to be seen as a leader, it's definitely not heavy. It is more of Kellen, you made it. Let's keep getting better. What else can we do with this? So being a young black judge, I was moving towards something as a young individual, being a part of the community, and now to say, hey, this is what you were moving towards, whether you knew it or not, Kellen. When you gave back doing the community service work, the heaviness I think comes from those that do not know me, The heaviness comes from maybe an egotistical standpoint where I feel challenged in the community, where I'm not in my robe, I'm not in a suit and tie, and somebody looks at me and says, "Oh, what do you do for a living?" And sometimes they'll say, "I work for the court." Sometimes they'll say, "I'm a lawyer." Sometimes they'll say, "I'm a judge." And then that it's more of a response from those that don't get me, that don't understand who I am as a person. That causes the heaviness piece. Yeah. That causes the feeling that I need to lash back out, or I need to challenge this individual when I feel challenged. Similar to what our youth deal with on a regular basis. When challenged, how can you respond and not react?
Yeah. Man, thank you.
You're welcome.
What do you see down the road here? I mean, are there reforms that we can start to institute? Are there things that can make our city and our community a better place? What's your kind of macro point of view here?
It's tough to think on a macro level these days.
It sure is.
Sure.
Yeah. Are we going to continue to recognize as a society, as a community, that maybe we don't have this criminal justice thing correctly, and maybe we need to continue to be aware of what we're doing wrong and to say that we're wrong and to continue to make changes? That's what I hope for. But will there be a space for that? I'm not sure. What I want to get across to individuals is that just because an individual's been charged with a crime, that does not automatically make them a bad person. You are not defined by your worst day. If we held all of us to that same standard, we'd all be in trouble.
Yeah,
we'd all be in trouble. So my biggest thing is, one, don't give up on an individual because they've done wrong. Employers, just because an individual's done wrong or has a scarlet letter of a felony on their record from 5-10 years ago, do not give up on that individual. And I think that's the greatest thing that I want to pass along to the community. We cannot give up on each other. That we all wear this title of Grand Rapidians, and that does not only include those that we like, but that's all of us, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But I just tell you, we can't give up on each other.
I think that's key.
Yep.
We can't give up on each other.
We can't give up.
My takeaway, which I think I hope everyone takes away from this conversation, is you hit on some real humanitarian processes that I think are universal for all of us. This idea of love and connection and relationship, taking accountability of ourselves and our community, but also being willing to see things from a new space and a new lens. 15 years of being in the space of family court and working with families and youth, these are some revolutionary ideas and concepts, but they're really the basic foundation and principles of just being a natural human being. Sure. And so I just want to say thank you again for this idea of looking at systems, because the system concept and then humanity and how can they interplay, can they intermix? And I'm a believer that they can too, because systems are made up of people. And so I think that if we can continue to recognize that, despite our cultural, religious, and all of those things that get in the way, but just kind of go back to those fundamental principles that you described today for us all, I think that our courts can be different. So just want to thank you for being in this space with us, taking the time and sharing with us. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Really appreciate you, man.
Yeah, thank you, guys. Give back to the Delta Project. That's the one way that you can give back to your community. That's one change you can make.
All right.
That's one change you can make.
Thank you for listening. Check out our programs on the Delta Project's website, thedeltaproject.co. And be sure to follow us on Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.